Well, good morning, and thanks, Marty, for the handoff here, and we'll shift gears towards weather. And looking ahead here, I guess the bottom line, I think, of the message is that more of the same in the short term, but there are some changes indicated and suggested here coming up this weekend and perhaps beyond. So that's definitely something a little bit new to talk about. We haven't had a lot of that this particular year. For the past week, starting off with our review, interestingly, the mean temperatures for most of the state actually turned out a little cooler than normal. A lot of that is at nighttime, and some of it is a result of the very dry air that we've had lots of here this particular year. Canadian air mass, low dew points, just low humidities, and again, our minimum temperatures have been consistently below the normal. There's another thing to talk about and mention with that, and that is that given the current situation in much of the state with lack of water and moisture, it is a good thing or beneficial thing when we do have these cool evenings. It does give plants a little bit of a chance to get away from or alleviate, at least temporarily, some of the stress that they're experiencing during the day with again, sun and again, very dry conditions. So the cooler than normal is sometimes a positive thing. On the right hand side of the image here, we have our weekly totals. There were some lucky areas in eastern portions of lower Michigan, especially the southeast, that saw some convection last week. And you can see the totals there, some cases more than half an inch, some cases actually more than an inch, but that was definitely the exception rather than the rule. And you can see large areas, not just Michigan, but of the Midwest that had very little or no precipitation. Again, continuing this pattern that we've been stuck in since early April. And that's what I wanted to bring up here. Again, relative to our normal climate. And some people say, well, what is that? Or what is normal? Well, this helps put a little bit of perspective. So the graphic in the background here, there's a couple things on here, but this is daily accumulated rainfall back to the beginning of October last year. That's the beginning of our hydrologic cycle. That's at least what's used back in the fall. That starts here on the left. And then so you've got daily accumulated precipitation. That's in green. This is for Grand Rapids, but it's very typical, this particular graphic, this trace of much of central and central lower Michigan as well. The brown dark line here is the normal accumulated rainfall on a daily basis. And so again, if we're tracking the normal, those two lines should be at least heading in the same direction with the same slope over time. And you can see for a lot of last fall and a lot of the winter that was the case. But back here in February, and definitely in March and then into early April. And this is a key factor. We had significantly above normal, wetter than normal conditions, both rain and snowfall at that time of the year. And then you can see by the first week in April here, pointer here, we actually had a surplus of more than 5 inches of water, at least for this time frame. So and again, many people actually reported standing water, and it was a completely different situation. But since then, as we all know and probably appreciate, since then we've had very little precipitation. And with the numbers down in the lower right hand side here, at least at this site, just a little bit over 2 inches of total rain here since the 5th of April. That's about 10 weeks. That is, you can see 8 inches below normal. That's a huge departure. And at the same time, just as importantly, the atmospheric demand for evaporation has been very high, especially back in May and into early June. You can see the summed potential evapotranspiration, that's the PET there, almost 11 inches. So not only did we have much below normal precipitation, we also had above normal water demand or atmospheric demand. And again, the combination of those two things just means rapid, very rapid, almost at the top of the list of where it's top of the scale we would ever expect to see in our topsoils, the drawdown. And there's still water at depth because of that earlier heavy precipitation in late winter, but the plants have to have rooting systems that are able to get down and access that. So of course our annual crops don't have that. Many shallow rooted crops don't have that and have been suffering because of again, especially the topsoils. On the upper left hand side here, this is the precipitation totals during the last 60 days. So since the third week of April, just to show some spatial scale of this. But the blue area in here That's less than 2 inches for that 60-day, 2-month time frame, way below. That's less than 25% of normal, or what it should be. And it illustrates again where things are right now. The driest areas of the state, certainly across west central and central lower down into southern lower, is where we have the largest deficits. So that's at least where we've been. So where are we headed? Here's the weather map for this morning. It should look very similar, familiar to most people, because it hasn't changed that much. The blue H here, high pressure over Ontario or over Lake Huron here. That's been there much of the last several days, with the Canadian origin air mass here, low humidities, easterly winds. That's another thing that's been so strange this year. We've had an awful lot of easterly flow. Some of it, of course, with smoke from the wildfires and forest fires in Canada. That will be the case again here today. And tomorrow you'll see haze as well. But generally, when we have an airflow or configuration, and down in the lower left-hand side here, this is the current jet stream. And it's just, the meteorologists say this is a very high amplitude blocky pattern, because nothing is really moving very fast any direction. And we have areas with much above normal temperatures and areas of relatively cool temperatures. But the big issue is that just very little is moving. And so that's going to be changing though over the next week. This is where we've been for several weeks. We're going to see at least a temporary change in that. No precipitation today, another except a little cooler today than it has been. The air above the surface and so forth is relatively cooler. So high temperatures today and tomorrow probably only in the low, maybe a couple of mid-80s, but more several degrees cooler than it has been. But we'll warm back up on Saturday and Sunday here for the weekend. Here's the map for tomorrow, for Friday. And there is something to mention, because you can see this weather system that's been stuck over the southeastern U.S. With lots of precipitation. Some of the moisture from that is going to certainly approach southeastern lower Michigan, and there will be a chance for some, we'll call it scattered showers, to develop, especially during the afternoon tomorrow on Friday, and possibly linger into Saturday. But this will not be, it won't be significant, and most areas will remain dry, but at least there'll be the chance there. And if it does occur, it will be probably across the southeastern lower peninsula, with another fair hazy day expected in most other parts of the state. By Saturday, you can see that system moving off. There's some lingering threat of some scattered showers here in the far eastern part of the state. And then this is the more important part of the news here. A weather system off to our west actually starts to make progress. Well, you ask, how can it make progress? We've seen so many weather systems out over the northern part of the U.S. As they approach, they never make it here. Well, it's because of that upper air pattern that I just mentioned, but that is changing. And as we look here into the weekend, and this is the forecast for Sunday night at 8 p.m. Notice here on the left-hand side here, this is the again projected upper air pattern. We have a big trough moving from west to east. That's another key difference from most of this spring and early summer here. That normally that's usually a significant precipitation producer. So we've got the dynamics in the atmosphere to provide the lift. That's important. We also need some water vapor, and it does look like it's going to be able to draw on some moisture from the south. On the right-hand side here, these are 6-hour forecast precipitation totals as of Sunday night. You can see green. There's precip expected to fall over many areas of the Great Lakes region, including Michigan. So this is the best chance for rainfall we've had in Michigan probably for several weeks now. How much? That's one of the big questions. We're looking at the threat of precipitation beginning in western upper Michigan, probably overnight, Saturday into Sunday. Most of the state, this will be Sunday afternoon into Monday, and probably into early Tuesday. So an extended 36 to 48 hour period with the system as it goes through for rainfall. Right now, best guidance we have collectively, it's suggesting probably something on the order of, certainly 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. Some areas will do better than that. But again, that's not going to end, obviously, the situation that we're in right now, but it certainly would help be a start to get some moisture. So that's right now the best guess. I'm hoping most areas are probably closer to that 1/2 an inch is what we're looking at for this particular round. But just as importantly, this is signaling here, again, the upper air pattern here, at least a temporary change in this big blocky pattern that we've had. And there will be another weather system probably late next week, and then one following that next weekend. So the message here that certainly that I'm seeing is that we're going to have more frequent, at least temporarily change here, more frequent chances for precipitation than has been, and it's normal. That's what we would see typically normally for late June and early July. And that's sort of the direction that we're headed here for at least the next week or two. For precipitation totals for the entire week through next Thursday morning, as I mentioned, most areas around that half-inch mark. Some spots maybe a little bit better than that. The vast majority of what you're looking at here, again, that is expected Sunday through Tuesday of next week. Potential evapotranspiration rates here for the week, not as high as what we have seen in earlier parts of the season, but most areas still looking at 0.2 of an inch per day. It's still above normal, especially given the next couple of days, more of the same. So again, where water is there, and if you've got irrigation running, and if you have irrigation, I know people are running that, but the water demands will still be above normal for the next several days, probably a little bit less as we move into the middle of next week. Let's move to the medium range here, because again, this is an important, I think, piece of our outlook here today. On the lower left, the jet stream projected pattern, and it's similar, but it's different. There's some very significant differences. One is that the overall amplitude, again, the high amplitude flow, is less than it has been for the last couple of weeks. The other thing is that the troughing feature over Eastern North America has shifted a little bit to the west, closer to the Great Lakes region. That's important for us. And it really means, and this is something we also haven't seen for a while, but it suggests, at least for mean temperatures, the upper right here, that we probably will go actually down to normal or below, cooler than normal, especially towards the end of next week and then following. There's going to be a couple troughs move through, like the one here this weekend, and another one following that. And the other one that, again, is somewhat encouraging in this pattern, more frequent chances for precipitation. 8 to 14 days is similar to this, but basically calling for normal to even possibly above normal precipitation totals into that first week of July. So late June, early July, much closer to at least to normal, or typically what we see for late July. And that is certainly a significant change from the weather pattern of the last several weeks. Finally, looking at our new long lead outlooks, which were issued by the Climate Prediction Center in the last week, the outlooks for July on top, temperatures on the left, precipitation totals on the right, and below that, the 3-month outlooks, July through September. Both of them still call for warmer than normal mean temperatures. That's been consistent with previous outlooks. The outlook for precipitation, very importantly here for our growing season, it has officially now moved to, well, you can see no color there, the no forecast direction, equal chances of below, near, and above normal totals for the July period. But the change in, and I've actually highlighted this here in the red, that is different. For the 3-month outlook, July through September, they have shifted drier. And it calls for, well, normal to below normal precipitation totals for that time frame. That's new. 2 reasons for that. One was some statistical forecast guidance that suggests drier than normal for the later part of the summer. The other one is that there's a very large area of the Midwest right now, the Corn Belt, that is abnormally dry. And when you have a large area of that, the old statement, drought begets drought, there's some physical reality. We've talked about that in previous weather briefings. And that's a part of the forecast, just that there's a lack or relatively little, much less than normal water in the landscape right now. And that typically is correlated with drier than normal conditions in the upcoming weeks. And so that was also a factor that the forecasters use. And it doesn't mean that's a stone cold law or stone block for drier than normal, but it is different from what we have seen earlier. So wrapping up here again, short term, more of the same, fair, dry, hazy, but changes coming, at least temporarily here. By the weekend, rain likely across the state for the first time in a while. mostly Sunday through Tuesday, and then maybe hopefully a couple more chances after that. That's consistent with the medium range forecast guidance. And as you just saw for our long leads, that's also similar to previous issues, but both of them still call for warmer and potentially drier than normal as we move towards the latter part of the summer. But that's something we'll keep an eye on as we move ahead. So wrapping up the weather and then thinking about next week, our virtual breakfast, we'll have Dr. Jamie Wilbur, who's going to be with us to talk about Cercospora and leaf spot management in sugar beets. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Phil to talk about credits.